Good morning, my babes and babettes. It's cold out, and it's going to be cold out for the next 6 months because I live in Canada. Hooray! I am your resident active advocate, and I am here to talk to you today about the advantages of the social model. Now, in contrast with the medical model, as previously discussed, the social model places disability in society rather than in the body. In other words, you are not disabled because of your physical, mental, emotional, or social difference. You are disabled because of the way society treats those differences. Now, this model arose largely in response to the medical model, but also to the moral model, which we will be discussing later on. And it prefers to think of people with disabilities as people who are not necessarily different from everyone else in a very specific or special way, because its general teaching is that everyone is different from everyone else. It's just that some differences may be more noticeable or may be frowned upon by society, but those are due to factors largely outside of our control. So, while the medical model does benefit us in creating surgeries, in creating devices, in creating technology that we can use to minimize the aspects of our differences that may disadvantage us in the sort of society that we live in, the point of the social model is to say that even with those differences, you are fully valuable as a human being, just the way you are, and not in the you're important just the way you are, we love you sort of childish Barney sort of way, but in the sense that the social model believes that everyone has value regardless of their ability or perceived disability. So, when the social model was created, it allowed for people with disabilities to more freely express them, as well as to live inside of society rather than to be cast out by the vast majority of the society who didn't understand them, who didn't understand their differences. The social model largely gave rise to the end of things like institutionalization, to the end of things like insane asylums. And later on in this series, I will be talking about the distinction between sanity and insanity as defined by society, as defined within the medical model as well. So, the social model allowed for further integration of people with disabilities into society and also advocates for our rights within society so that we are more fully capable of doing things that will benefit the world around us. We're not to be cast out, we're not to be cast aside because we have intrinsic value in that we are human beings. In allowing people with disabilities to serve their community and to get jobs and to get an education, it also allows for the expansion of society itself. I think that this is a highly beneficial model in that it does see the worth of people who had formerly been considered not necessarily worthless, but of lesser worth than a person who would sit at the center of the bell curve, as previously discussed in this series. The center of the bell curve is basically the place around which every body, every mind, every social and emotional expression is supposed to center, and it is the place at which the vast majority of the population does center, which is basically the reason why the bell curve is still supported when it comes to medical matters. But the social model states that regardless of your divergence from this center, you still have the right to be treated as a human being. You are still worthy of rights. You are worthy of being permitted to take responsibility not only for your own life, but for the lives of the people around you. And this also gives us the onus to control our own life and our own destiny, shall we say, because it's not putting our fate in the hands of doctors, in the hands of scientists, in the hands of religious leaders who would otherwise possibly seek to fix us or to thrust us away from society as a whole. I think that the capacity to take responsibility is something of which most human beings are capable after a certain age. And if they are of a certain mindset in which they want to take responsibility. The problem with some disability communities, not even with their communities, but with the individuals and how they are raised, is that if the person raising them feels that the person is sufficiently different from the remainder of society, they may not want that person to take responsibility for their own life, which I think is highly detrimental to the person in question because they're not being permitted to fully express their humanity. And in that sense, disallowing them from society is the same as shoving them in a corner and saying, you are not smart enough, you are not strong enough, you are not enough like us, that you are worthy of taking responsibility for your own life. And I don't buy into that philosophy at all. I feel that people should be taught how to take responsibility, both in the physical sense, in being taught skills like transportation, like cooking, like financial responsibility, like housekeeping, making a family, getting an education, all of these things that grant one a well rounded life. That is what all people are worthy of receiving, are worthy of controlling. And that is what the social model supports. So, those are the advantages of the social model. And tomorrow I will be discussing with you the disadvantages of the social model because they do exist. While this is a very well rounded model, there are definitely things that make it restricted and restrictions that it forces upon itself. So, I will be discussing those tomorrow. Thank you very much. I will see you later. Button, button.